range. So we did look at that in arriving at that number. I think the hope is to be quicker, but I think we're concerned with the volume of the things that the board will probably have to review, that it may be a lengthy process. And then the board will publish its decision on the medical marijuana control website. So if conditions are added or if things are denied, that will be on the website and available to the public. So our rules are out, and we are accepting public comments until January 13th. And so we really do welcome the comments, and then we will also be working with the board's policy committee, and Dr. Soin is the chair of that committee. So we'll be working with that committee as we start in the new year on the rules and modifying them based on the comments that we receive.
Thanks, Kim. It's a lot of work. Before we get into the review of the rules, we remind the public the last time we met that there is a 4-step process to accept comments or to provide comments on the rules. Just quickly, remember that there's the initial comment period where the public is open, and as Kim alluded to, that will, for these set of rules, go up to the 15th of January. Then there will be 2 other stopping points as the Common Sense Initiative takes a look at the rules. And then the JCAR will have a public hearing or comment period as well. And that's where you'll have that 4th opportunity to get input on the rules. So keep that in mind as we walk our way through the rules today. There'll be ample opportunity as a member of the public to submit comments as well. So I want to make sure we remind everybody as we go through this process. All right. So for the committee's work, let's kind of re-step back through the sections, and we'll take questions and comments as we work through them.
First of all, what an impressive amount of effort that you put into this. Thank you. You clarified a lot of concerns I think many of us had as we were going into this. What you've outlined, though, is the first time that the plant meets the physician meets the patient, and we're trying to help the physician help the patient. And some of these issues I think are going to be difficult to deal with. But first of all, you have the physician dealing with a patient with a variety of different illnesses. You're giving them a plant that comes in 100 or more different varieties containing different blends of compounds that we don't fully understand, of course. And then you're at a position where you're going to try and have the patient tell the physician this worked or it didn't work. You mentioned in passing the loop of the information loop. How is the physician going to complete the loop? The patient comes in, the drug fails, the plant fails, whatever it might have been. What does the physician do with that knowledge is obviously important because he's going to give that information all the way somehow back down the line, back to the farmer, because we talked about this last month. They're not being informed. Do you foresee that there might be such a loop between those groups?
Yes, what we're envisioning, and this goes back to that idea of the annual report, in conversation with the physician panel, we wanted to try to make it as simple a process as possible. So, as Kim said, we're looking at surveys kind of for what I would call macro level information, but we do envision a point when the physician is going through the annual renewal with the patient, of having a few stopping points in the kind of renewal process to identify the form in which the patient used medical marijuana, and we're envisioning that could be multiple. We want to know if there were any negative interactions related to any of those forms, and that's kind of just an open text. Here's the patient's description of what happened, and then also a positive reaction question as well. So what positive effects did you see? Being mindful of the precious time the physicians have when they're dealing with patients, we didn't want to overburden it, but we thought those broad categories capture that information, and then that can work its way back through the annual report and through the control program, which I think then gets to other people upstream in the process.
That leads me to the next question, which of course is the product itself that you're dealing with for the next disease that comes along. The way the law is written now, it's going to prove for diseases for which there's no scientific evidence to support their use. How is it possible then to state that in order for the next disease to be placed on the list, it must now meet a considerably, if not actually impossible, threshold before it's approved. So if someone comes in and they say, I'd like to include psoriasis, there's no medical literature for obvious reasons. It's a Schedule I, there never will be. Should we change the threshold to include animal research? Or must it be with humans? Because if we wait for humans, we'll never have it. And we don't have it now. You can see the challenge there. I don't know, it almost seems unfair that the next disease has to meet such a higher criteria. So what will we do? And the other thing, of course, is when do we decide that the marijuana benefits no longer outweigh its risks? What do the benefits need to achieve? Because at the moment, we don't know that there will be benefits because we have no literature guiding us on our expectations. I don't know how you're going to work this out because we don't have the data to answer the questions. What are your thoughts on how to be fair to the next disease that comes along?
The items that are included in the rule come from the statute. So the statute tells us that that's what the board needs to look at.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the points that you raise are really very good ones, and I think the board is going to have to look at what type of evidence it does take on that, and we really are envisioning that we will need experts, and hopefully as we go down this road, there is more research and more information. But I agree with you. I think it is a particularly difficult thing to know exactly how to balance all of that, and it's just a very different type of thing for physicians to deal with, that they don't have all of the research that they typically have.
And they're only getting 2 hours of CME to train them in this. Physicians feel that's enough.
I have a comment on what you said, and I respect everything you're telling me, but I just feel like a lot of that is hypothetical, because we're talking about stuff that's down the road, and potentially maybe a new disease may benefit from marijuana, but we already have a very large comprehensive list to work from now. And to your point about human data, well, medical marijuana is getting approved all over the country. There will be a plethora of data available with all these other states and comparables. So I would say that if there is a potential hole or gap that we have, we would address it at that particular time, because potentially in the future we may have more data influence on those particular indications from other states. And yeah, I do have a question for you that you brought up regarding physicians. If say there's an ineffective strain of medical marijuana, and that has to somehow get back to the farmer. I don't know how myself as a physician would even know that it was an ineffective strain, or that maybe the patient just doesn't respond to medical marijuana. So what would you suggest? How would we even determine that as a practitioner or prescriber?
We're going to have a lot of false negatives, obviously, and the only trial and error. Unfortunately, that's the sort of thing that takes place with pharmaceuticals years before physicians ever see them in their hands. Now, those tests will fall on your shoulders. It seems quite unfair, but that's where we are. People are generating so many different blends, the different aggregate effects of the compounds. How can you possibly tell? All you can do is the patient comes in with their symptom, and does it go away? And did they have negative side effects? I doubt they'll have negative side effects, but the problem will be the drug fails too often. So it will end up being trial and error. Well, why don't you try this blend or try that strain? Unfortunately, that's where we are today. We don't know enough about the 60+ different alkaloids that this plant contains to tell the physician which blend they should use. That data will come. I agree with you completely. The problem that I foresee is that this is a compound that no drug company would bother working with, because there's no profit for them to make. All the companies that I work with are in Europe and making compounds that are not in the plant so that they can patent it. Those may end up, and they're testing it on their own, you're right, they're getting the kind of data. I don't know who's going to spend the money to test marijuana in America, because as soon as it's approved, it's going to be incredibly, I think, expensive to pay for. But I hope you're right. I hope we do get that data soon.
So, Jared, comment on this train of thought?
Yes. Yeah, I want to comment regarding the issue of risk versus benefits. And I recognize that we don't have data in medical marijuana. But there are a whole host of things where physicians don't have good solid data on judging the risk and benefits. I honestly do it every day when I'm judging what is a patient's quality of life on chemotherapy or off chemotherapy. I don't have good individualized data for that, so it is a judgment. So I don't see this discussion of risk-benefit with medical marijuana to be any different than a lot of other risk-benefit discussions I have when they're in a data vacuum.
Okay, it is an evolving science, and I think we have to just recognize that it will continue to get more and more sharp as we move down the pathway. So let's kind of take our journey back through the rules. And unless there's any objection, I think we'll let the definition area stand. Those are going to be a common set of definitions across all areas, unless there's specific questions about that. Let's jump into 3202, which is the first rule around the certificates and coming into the ability to actually offer those certificates. So focusing on that area, questions from the committee, comments from the committee on that particular area. Yes?
And coming from a non-medical person, so excuse my naivety, during the training that the physicians will undergo, with the lack of information, will they be instructed at all on potential strengths of dosage, or how often dosages should be administered, or anything along that line? Or will it truly be just a trial and error type of thing?
You know, I think that gets a bit tricky because I don't know that physicians, they're not really required to provide a lot of information in the recommendation about the dosage and the strength and the strain. And in other states, they typically don't require a lot of that specified information because it starts to have some legal implications there for the physicians. I know that New York has a 4-hour course that they are requiring for anyone who gets a certificate in New York, and I don't know if they have that information in their course. And I believe there's a course in Florida that we found as well. So we'll be continuing to monitor that and get more information on what's included in the courses, but I'm not sure it's going to go down into that detail, but we'll see as we do more research.
I think you'll also find that as we look at the dispensary rules this afternoon, we're going to start to see a little more granular emerging of some of the specifics there. So keep that in mind as we walk through those rules later today. Okay? Other comments? Nancy? Yes?
Question on the course as well. Will you allow physicians to have their course accessed by online so they don't have to be present somewhere?
Yes, that's the goal. Yeah, that's definitely the goal, to have online, and it would count as part of their annual or biannual CME requirement.
Those 2 hours are not additional, but
Right.
part of.
So first of all, I really want to applaud you for doing the physician survey. I think that's very helpful and instructive. One of the things I noted in that is that just over 10% of physicians were likely to recommend. It's a fairly low number, so one of my concerns in structuring these rules is, are there going to be enough physician recommenders to make this a successful program? And with that in mind, in 3202, number 7, about the 2 hours of continuing CME, is it in the statute that has to occur prior to getting the recommendation? Or does the statute say that has to be within the 2 years after? What's the timing on that CME?
The statute indicates on renewal. It does not require prior to. We felt like if physicians are going to do this, we want to have them have a good comfort level. And so by rule, we wanted to require that, but it is not required in the statute. The initial one is only required in the rule at this time.
And to the point of enough physicians, you know, we have struggled with that question as well. What I can say is that we feel these rules are as, let's say, user-friendly for the physician as possible. No fees associated with it. It's part of kind of inline processes that already exist, and the interactions with the board are fairly routine. So We hope the answer is yes. We've tried to make it as accessible as possible.
Because obviously by rule, unlike the cultivators and unlike the dispensaries, the physicians, there's no financial reward for any of this. So I'm concerned that that may be where the problem is going to lie in creating a successful program.
Can you remind us again the time of that survey? How far ahead of your real work was the survey conducted?
In September.
Okay, so it might be telling if we were to resurvey at some point, after the rules are out, comments are there, it might give us a trend as to, is this causing us to have fewer than 10% now, or are we starting to see some energy behind it?
That's a great idea.
That's
If there's an opportunity to retest the waters, we can do that, that would be great. To help us around the table that may not be as close to CME as others, just generally speaking, can you tell us how CME bubbles up in some of the more specialized areas? Whether it be marijuana or not, how does that organically grow up so that physicians have the ability to have sources for their CME? How does that happen in the state of Ohio?
The State Medical Board of Ohio does not actually certify CME. CME is accredited through
Sweet dreams are made.